I ended my last video talking about a Whole 30 that Nate and I did that turned into a Whole 80. So I thought in this video I'd dive deep and give you guys all the details. If you're familiar with the Whole 30 at all, you've probably heard the term tiger blood, which is originally from a really weird Charlie Sheen interview, and nobody knows what he's talking about, but Melissa Hartwig and her Whole 30 team have taken this phrase and made it into a description for that place in your Whole 30 that you hit, usually like halfway through, where you're on the downhill slope and life is beautiful. For some people, tiger blood is like flipping a switch. All of a sudden, you have high energy, low cravings, your clothes fit better, your workouts are stronger. For others, tiger blood is slow and steady. It's just this realization that you have more energy than you had before, your mood is more stable, maybe you sleep better, maybe you're not craving the things that you craved before, maybe it's not dramatic, but it's still tiger blood. Everybody gets tiger blood at different times. I know somebody who got their tiger blood day 8, and I was like, what? Because when Nate and I did this real Whole 30, we were somewhere in the 20s when we got our tiger blood. It says in the Whole 30 resources that you should get tiger's blood somewhere between day 16 and 27. And of course, each person and each Whole 30 is different, so it's different. For me, I think it must have been day 22 or 23 before I started being like, oh my gosh, my life is awesome. Like I mentioned in my last video, the first thing that I noticed was improved body composition, particularly in my tummy and my love handles. They're way less handly now, which is cool. I like that. But when I noticed the change in my body, it was like something clicked in my brain, and all of a sudden I realized all the other things that had changed as well. My energy was consistent throughout the entire day, and my mood was so much more stable. The mental fuzziness I used to have was so much less. I didn't even notice it anymore, and I was way less forgetful, which had been a huge issue for me. I no longer felt bloated and had issues after meals, even really heavy meat-based meals. I still just felt energized and satisfied. I didn't feel heavy and uncomfortable. And I had improved digestion. Maybe it wasn't like way improved, but improvement is improvement, and I'll take what I can get. When I asked Nate to recall for me some of his tiger blood experience from that Whole 30, he remembers sleeping way better, no longer crashing in the middle of the day or being really worn out at the end of the day when, he hadn't done anything to deserve it. He remembers having this sharpness of mind, not all the time, but it was a new thing to feel like you had a superpower or something when all of a sudden you could just focus in on something you needed to focus on. Nate has psoriasis of the scalp, so a really big non-scale victory for him was getting off of this medicated shampoo that he had been on for years and years, since I think he was probably 15 or 16 when he started using it. The shampoo that he had been using was really, really, really expensive, and it was highly not recommended because the doctors told him, if you use this shampoo now, you probably will lose all your hair when you get older. And Nate was like, that's a risk I'm willing to take. I'm sick and tired of my scalp bleeding. I'm sick and tired of being embarrassed by all of the redness and the itchiness and the uncomfortable, all the dead skin flaking everywhere. So he used the shampoo. And when we got married, I encouraged him, do whatever works for you. Use the shampoo. If the shampoo's the only thing that works, use the shampoo. So it was during the Whole 30 that he was finally able to stop using the shampoo. The Whole 30 didn't cure his psoriasis. He still has it, and some days it's worse than others, but it's not so bad now that he needs this medicated shampoo that was actually doing him more harm than good in the long run. So, of course, we started noticing all of these things with less than a week left in the Whole 30. and I knew that reintroductions meant figuring out what foods made me feel crummy like I had before the Whole30. And I wasn't ready to feel crummy. So we kept going. We committed to a second 30 days, which made a whole 60, but we didn't commit to what we were going to do at the end of the 60 days. We knew at the end of the 30 days that we wanted to continue a little while longer with the way that we had been eating, to experience the fullness of those non-scale victories and to really understand how our body felt and everything before we reintroduced any of those other foods. So we knew that at the end of the 60 days, we would know whether to keep going or to reintroduce foods. When the time came around the end of the 60 days, we decided that we wanted to go a little longer, but we knew that we couldn't keep going forever, mainly because Melissa Hartwig and the Whole30 website and like every person I've ever talked to in my whole life told me, you can't keep doing this forever, it's completely unsustainable. So, at 60 days, I started making plans to reintroduce at 80 days. At day 80, we started reintroductions. Now, when I was doing this, I didn't exactly think I was going to end up making YouTube videos about it or sharing my experience with the whole world. I know there's already 1 million resources out there about the Whole30, so what does my experience have to say about it? If you really want to know about the Whole30, just go check it out for yourself. But because it fits in with the rest of my health journey, here we are. If I remember correctly, I did the reintroductions pretty much by the book, which means that when I reintroduced a food, I ate it once to see how I felt, and then I ate a little more of it or a different kind of the same kind of thing, grains and grains, dairy and dairy, later on in the day, and then I held off for 3 days, and I paid attention to how I felt while I was eating it, directly after eating it, like an hour after I ate it, later on in the day, the next day, the next day, the next day. And I paid attention to how it affected me physically, mentally, emotionally, all the jazz. But that's just the problem. I'm not really sure if I'm remembering correctly. I don't remember exactly what foods in each category I chose to eat to reintroduce them to myself. And I don't remember what order I did reintroductions in. All I remember is the stuff that I thought was important at the time. This makes me feel good, this makes me feel bad, etc. So, first things first, I didn't reintroduce legumes. Why? Because I didn't want to. I guess I don't care that much about legumes. I didn't feel like I was missing anything by not having them in my life, and I felt like my life was simpler without them. So, as long as it wasn't detrimental to my health, I figure, why make my life more complicated? I also did not reintroduce sugar or added sweeteners of any kind, including honey and maple syrup, because even before I did the Whole30, I recognized that sugar was a trigger for my depression. And I had been trying to cut sugar for a long time. And now that I successfully had, for 80 days, I wasn't about to go messing that up by putting it back in my diet. I can rant about this in another video, but let me just say, sugar is not necessary for human survival. You don't have to eat sugar to maintain health and vitality. Of course, I was nervous to reintroduce anything at all, but if there was one thing I was excited to reintroduce and see how I felt, it was grains, because being the carb queen, I felt pretty confident that they weren't going to affect me at all. Turns out I was wrong. I remember being super happy to eat grains, but I was not so happy afterward when I felt bloated, sluggish, and fuzzy mentally. Remember how I said that sugar triggered my depression? Well, it turns out grains trigger my sugar dragon. As soon as I ate grains, I would be craving all the processed foods and especially anything sweet. And I mean any sweet treat, any kind of cookie, cake, ice cream, dessert, whatever. Like, I wanted it. And I'd freak out and cry, like, Nate, I want ice cream. So I figured out pretty quick that grains were not worth it for me. And for me, that meant continuing to follow the Whole30 rules. Any and all grains, including pseudo grains like quinoa and corn. And I did my best not to make any of those like paleo concoctions with almond flour and stuff, because for me, it was too close. And the repercussions of eating food like that were too much for me. I also chose to reintroduce dairy, which I was pretty sure was going to go like this. Mad eats dairy. Mad feels atrocious and never eats dairy again because she's finally proved to herself that dairy doesn't agree with her. But this is not what happened. I'm pretty sure I reintroduced with cheese because let's face it, if you're never going to eat dairy again, your last bit of it should probably be cheese. When I ate the cheese, it tasted amazing. After eating the cheese, I felt normal. For the rest of that day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, I felt fine. I felt normal. I felt like myself. I thought I must have done something wrong. So I did it again. I ate some cheese, and I think I ate some yogurt. I started cooking with butter instead of oil. I tried to get myself several types of dairy in one day, really let my system know what was going on so it could show me the signs and symptoms. And believe me, I analyzed myself to death. I was thinking about my mental clarity and my physical body and my emotions and my mood and of course my depression, my digestion, hello. All of it was fine. I didn't have any issues, and actually, I've been eating dairy since then to this day. It's been about 2 years now. One theory that I have for the reason why I thought dairy negatively affected me, and it really doesn't seem to, is that at the time when I thought that it was dairy, I had a lot of friends who were lactose intolerant, and I had a lot of issues. But I was also eating a lot of sugar and processed foods. Now that I had cut those out, I could enjoy dairy without any problems. One thing I didn't mention that we did cut out during our Whole30 and reintroduced at the end of it is alcohol. Long story short, whiskey? Yes. Wine? A little bit every now and again is mostly okay. Beer? No. The beautiful thing about this whole elimination and reintroduction thing is that you get to decide what you reintroduce and when and how, and you get to analyze your own self to see what happens. You don't have to rely on what anybody else says. And you get to choose what you do with that information. I have friends who know now that dairy doesn't treat them well, and if they have pizza with cheese on it, that they're going to be really bloated and gassy and smelly afterwards. And they love to eat pizza with cheese on it. They continue to choose to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that because it's their life and they get to choose. You get to choose what's worth it to you. Nate's reintroductions went similarly to mine, but were a lot less dramatic. When he intentionally reintroduced grains, he felt bloated, he had mental fuzziness, and his energy dipped. When he introduced dairy, he didn't have any problems, except for one time when he drank a whole glass of milk and then was like, I'm never doing that again. He drinks whiskey, wine, and beer, but he prefers whiskey. He has, in the last 2 years or whatever, eaten legumes of different kinds, beans and lentils and peanut butter. He's had a sweet treat or two. His favorite thing used to be pumpkin pie, so if somebody makes him a slice, he's like, I'm going to eat this and pay the consequences. He gets to choose. But on a regular basis, in our day-to-day lives, Nate and I have practically the same diet. For a long time, we were basically Whole30 plus dairy and alcohol. Now, of course, it's a health journey, so things will change. I will be making more videos for this series, and also I'll be making videos about whatever you guys want to see. So if you have a question that you want me to answer or a suggestion about a video that I should make, leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear from you guys, You all are my favorite people. I think you're wonderful, and I'm grateful every day that you choose to be a part of this. So, until next time, later haters.